Okay, I decided I'm going to bolt up the rear end today. You put the spline shaft into the coupling on the back of the U-joint, support the rear end, and while you've got it supported you can get the upper swing arms bolted in, and then the lower swing arms I'm going to bolt in next. And then the bushings on these shocks are shot, so if these shocks end up being usable I'm going to have to replace these bushings, but for today I'm just going to temporarily bolt in these old ones just so I have something supporting the rear end so I can start the engine and test out the rear end. I'm not going to put the wheels on, I'm just going to test it with no load and make sure it sounds okay. Okay, I just finished installing the rear end, and then I was going to start working on getting the motor started so I could test it. And I wanted to drain down the fuel tank because I don't know how old the fuel is that's in here, and also I know that there's water in that fuel because the original cap that's on here is no good. The whole top's broken out. There's actually a hole, so rainwater was probably just collecting on the top of this and running in there. This was acting like a funnel and probably just funneling rainwater in there and mixing it with fuel. So I got a new cap, but I'm going to now that I've drained off the tank, I'm going to put fresh fuel in there with fuel stabilizer in it and put the new cap on, and I'm going to drain the bowl on the carburetor so that when I open the fuel petcock, which is located up underneath here where my hand's going, I'll get fresh fuel right into the carburetor, and that should be fine. But I've got a much bigger problem, which is I just noticed that the oil level which is viewable through this sight glass over here, is pretty much down to almost nothing, and I do see drips on the bottom of the engine. So what seemed like a small oil leak appears to have been a much bigger leak than that. The wooden blocking that I've been resting the ATV on all this time is just saturated with oil, so it appears like quite a bit of oil leaked out of the crankcase. So that's not good. But what I'll do is I'll get the engine running with some oil in it and try and determine where it's leaking from. I'm hoping it might just be the rear output seal for the drive shaft here. That would be, I think, a better situation because I might be able to actually replace that seal without having to pull the engine out. Okay, I just finished draining the carburetor. There's supposed to be a little tube attached to the nipple on the bottom of the bowl of the carburetor that was missing, so I attached my own small little tube. Just ran it down to a container to drain the gas off into, and then you turn this screw right here and that drains the bowl. And then once that stopped draining, then I opened the petcock and waited until clean fuel started flowing out of the carburetor. Okay, I just added some oil. Took about 2 quarts. Took 2 whole quarts to get just about to the full line on this sight glass, but I haven't started the engine yet. Once I start the engine and it pumps the oil through the system and fills the oil filter and anything else in the top end, that level's probably going to drop a little bit. But it's definitely full enough now that it should be safe to start. I also cleaned off the area down below where I saw the oil dripping before. It's nice and clean so that now when the oil starts to leak out, I'll be able to get a better idea of where it's coming from. Okay, it's a nice warm day in December. It's in the 40s, so I decided to move outside and work on the cat. And what I'm doing today is I'm going to replace this cross member right here. It actually bolts up to the frame behind here, and it is the mounting point for these arms that come across. Normally the headlights would sit here, and then the bumper. Now somebody was banging into things with this. They pushed the bumper back so far that it actually is actually touching the bottom of the radiator right there, and you can actually see this cross member is actually bent back towards the rear, and on the other side it's actually bent back so badly that it cracked. Right in here there's a big crack. So I've already unbolted the 2 bolts, and then I'm going to this side's already loosened because I was using this side to get the front differential unit out. So I'm gonna unscrew these Torx head screws to peel this back so I can get to the bolt on this side. I can take that cross member out. I've got a brand new one I picked up from a company called sledparts.com. They were having a clearance on all of their Arctic Cat ATV parts that they had in stock, so I wasn't able to buy a lot from them, but what I did buy from them I got at a huge discount. So this is a brand new part, and it's nice and straight. So alright, I'm going to remove those Torx head screws now. Okay, I've got that old mounting bracket out, that old crossbar, whatever you want to call it, this mount. And just to give you an idea how badly it was bent, you can see it's really bent back on this side. Like I said, cracked. And then this side it's bent all the way back. And if you really want to see how bad it is, you just put it next to the new one and see that it's the new one's perfectly straight. So now I'm going to mount the new one in. Okay, I went to mount this new bracket on and the holes won't line up. No surprise that the amount of force that was used to bend that original piece was also enough to slightly dislocate the mounting points on the frame, which if I pound on those I might be able to straighten it out, but I also run the risk of making things worse. So I'd rather just dress it by, what I did was I elongated this hole on the drill press, and that is going to hopefully give me just enough play so I can get the bolt in and avoid having to pound on the frame. Okay, drilling the offset hole for the mounting of this crossbar worked flawlessly, so now I'm able to bolt up the front bumper assembly back to it, and this side's lining up fairly well, and the other side I've already gotten bolted up. And now you can see with the new cross member that moved this forward enough so I actually have clearance now. There's only about a 1/4 of an inch between the bottom of the radiator and this part of the bumper assembly, but that's because this tube is badly banged in right there, and the only way to get that to come back out is to take the whole bumper assembly off, bang this straight. Problem is this pipe is no longer round, it's crushed. Matter of fact, it had already split. You can see somebody tried to do a poor job of welding it, so I think I just better leave that well enough alone and be happy with the fact that at least now I've got a little bit of clearance there, so if I do take a hit here, I got a little bit of breather room before I damage the radiator. Now that I've got the bumper reattached to that cross member that I replaced, last thing I want to do to that is I want to put a couple plastic wire ties to secure the headlight wiring. The headlights on this unit were missing, but the wires were held on. Each wire was held on to the cross member by a wire tie that I had to cut to get the old cross member out, and so I want to replace those. A couple of reasons. I want to make sure that the wires are easy to get to in case I do decide to put headlights on here, and secondly, I also don't want the wires to fall down inside here and possibly impinge with the operation of the electric fan motor behind the radiator. Okay, now I'm going to install the front differential. I've got it into position. It's real easy to put it back in now that I've completely opened up this area here, and also the fact that I don't have the I don't have the clearance issues I had before because I've actually got the inner CV joints off on both sides. I've just cleaned up this spline coupling here and removed what was left of the boot that was on there, so I can put fresh grease in there and put the new boot on that I ordered. Okay, get a liberal coating of lithium grease on the splines of this part of the shaft assembly, and now install the new boot that replaces what's left of this boot. Okay, this boot was actually a Suzuki part, and they just covered up the label, but the Suzuki part number is a 27153-62021, so you might be able to source that as a Suzuki part cheaper than what I paid through Arctic Cat, although it's a pretty inexpensive part. slide the differential out, and then that gives you easy access to slide this in, and the wide part of the boot actually clips over the end of the universal joint. Alright, Friday afternoon, December 17th, the sun's setting. Warmed up today. Had a cold snap here, and by warm up I mean it was in the 30s. So pretty cool out here, so I'm not going to stay out too long, but I did want to try and get something done on the Arctic Cat project today. So I'm going to finish mounting the front differential, which just means adding the nuts onto the bolts that I inserted last time I was out here. And I'm going to mount up the coupling that couples the drive shaft to the front differential, and then see if I have any time left after I do all that. Okay, I've got the housing all bolted up, and now I'm bolting in the coupler that attaches the input shaft on the front differential to this shaft that goes over to a U-joint coming out of the front of the motor. Okay, now the front differential's all bolted in, the coupling's all bolted up to the drive shaft, so that's fully installed. Okay, now I've installed the screws that hold this guard in place, and I've installed this shock, and the bushings on this shock are really badly worn out, but rather than wait for new bushings to come in, this is something that's going to be easy enough for me to change at a later date if everything else works out. At this point, same thing with the ball joints. The ball joints are definitely in need of replacement. But right now what I want to do is I just want to put it all together and see if it will run and drive. Once I've determined that it's going to run and drive and it's worth putting any more money into, then I'll order new ball joints and new bushings for all the shocks. And also I'll revisit the possibility of replacing some of these shock absorbers. Some of these look like they may have already been leaking.